I always knew I was second choice in my family, but I never thought a dog would rank higher than my life. Growing up in the Anderson household meant living in a carefully curated version of perfection. Our colonial-style home on Maple Street looked like something straight out of a magazine. White picket fence, manicured lawn, and my mother Patricia's prized rose garden that she tended to with religious devotion. From the outside, we were the American dream family. My father, Robert, worked as a regional manager at a tech company. My mother taught third grade at the local elementary school, and we had family dinners every Sunday after church. But perfection, I learned early, came with a price, and that price was always paid by the same person: me. My sister Jennifer was born when I was 8, and from the moment she drew her first breath, the family dynamic shifted permanently. Where I had been the center of attention, suddenly I became the responsible older sister, the one who was expected to understand, to help, to sacrifice without question. "Rebecca, you're such a good big sister," became the refrain of my childhood, usually said right after I'd given up something I wanted so Jennifer could have it instead. I didn't mind, not really. I loved my little sister with her golden curls and bright blue eyes that could charm anyone within a 5-mile radius. I helped her with homework, taught her how to ride a bike, and held her hand during thunderstorms. What I didn't realize was that I was being molded into a role that would define me for the next 25 years. The family problem solver, the emotional caretaker, the one who kept everything running smoothly while staying quietly in the background. By the time I turned 30, the pattern was so deeply ingrained that I didn't even question it anymore. I had a decent job as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm downtown, a small apartment that I barely had time to enjoy, and a savings account that seemed to drain faster than I could fill it, though never for my own needs. Jennifer had graduated college 2 years ago with an art degree and was still finding herself, which apparently required monthly financial supplements from her big sister. Then Princess arrived. Jennifer had been going through what she called her quarter-life crisis, a period that involved crying on my couch every weekend about how unfulfilled she felt, how she needed something to give her life meaning. Our parents nodded sympathetically and made all the right soothing sounds, but it was my shoulder that bore the weight of her tears and my credit card that funded her various attempts at self-discovery. "I think I need a dog," she announced one evening during Sunday dinner, her fork pushing around the meatloaf on her plate. "Something to take care of, you know, to give me purpose." "That's a wonderful idea, sweetheart," Mom said immediately, her face lighting up. "A pet would be so good for you." Dad nodded along. "Dogs are great companions. Very therapeutic." I looked up from my own plate, where I'd been mechanically eating while reviewing work emails on my phone. "Dogs are a big responsibility, Jen. They need walking every day, vet bills, food, training." "I know that," Jennifer snapped, her lower lip pushing out in that familiar pout that had been getting her out of trouble since she was 3. "I'm not a child, Rebecca. I can handle taking care of a dog." "Of course you can, honey," Mom said, shooting me a look that clearly conveyed I should be more supportive. "Rebecca's just being practical, aren't you, Becca?" The nickname made me wince, as it always did. Nobody else in the world was allowed to call me Becca. It was Jennifer's special thing, something that had started when she was too young to pronounce Rebecca properly. But somehow, over the years, it had become less endearing and more diminishing, a reminder that I was the accommodating big sister rather than my own person. "I just think she should research breeds, maybe volunteer at a shelter first to make sure—" "Oh, I already know exactly what kind I want," Jennifer interrupted, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "A golden retriever. I've been following this breeder online and they have the most gorgeous puppies. There's one that's just perfect. She's 8 weeks old and already so smart and beautiful." "How much?" Dad asked, though his tone suggested the price wouldn't be a deterrent. "Well, she's from champion bloodlines, so she's a bit more expensive than average. $3,000. I nearly choked on my water. "3,000? Jen, that's—" "An investment," Mom finished firmly. "Jennifer needs this, Rebecca. Can't you see how much happier she looks just talking about it?" And she did look happier. For the first time in months, Jennifer's face was animated, her hands gesturing excitedly as she pulled up pictures on her phone to show our parents. They cooed and awed over the fuzzy golden puppy on the screen, and I watched the familiar dance of Jennifer wanting something and our parents immediately figuring out how to make it happen. "We'll need to get supplies," Mom was saying, already making mental lists. A bed, toys, food bowls, a leash, collar. "And puppy training classes," Dad added. "The good ones. We want to make sure she's well behaved." I cleared my throat. "Who's paying for all this?" The question hung in the air for a moment, and I saw my parents exchange one of their looks, the kind of wordless communication that married couples develop after decades together. "Well," Dad said carefully, "we'll help where we can, of course. But Jennifer's still getting on her feet after graduation. And we just put that new roof on the house," Mom added. "Money's a little tight right now." They both looked at me expectantly, and I felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders like a heavy coat. I thought about my own savings account, about the vacation I'd been planning to take, my first real vacation in 3 years. I thought about the student loans I was still paying off, the car that needed new tires, the dentist appointment I'd been putting off because of the cost. "I suppose I could help," I heard myself saying, the words coming out automatically. "Maybe we could work out a payment plan." Jennifer's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? Oh my God, Becca, you're the best sister ever!" She jumped up from her chair and threw her arms around me, squeezing tight. "I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I find a good job." It was a promise I'd heard many times before, and we both knew how those usually turned out. But seeing the genuine joy on her face, I couldn't bring myself to say no. This was my role in the family, after all. The practical one, the reliable one, the one who made everyone else's dreams possible. 3 weeks later, Princess came home. She was, admittedly, adorable. A fluffy golden ball of energy with bright brown eyes and an irrepressible tail that never stopped wagging. Jennifer was completely smitten, carrying Princess everywhere and posting approximately 40 photos a day on social media with captions like, "My baby girl," and "Puppy love is the purest love." The first few weeks went smoothly enough. Princess was house-trained relatively quickly, and Jennifer seemed to be handling the responsibility well. She took Princess for walks every morning and evening, kept up with feeding schedules, and even started researching puppy nutrition with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen from her since her brief ceramics phase in college. But gradually, things began to shift. It started small, a request to watch Princess while Jennifer went to a job interview, then another while she met friends for lunch. "You're so good with her," Jennifer would say. And Princess did seem to calm down around me in a way she didn't with anyone else. Soon, I was watching Princess most weekends and then a few evenings a week when Jennifer had networking events or creative workshops that would help her career. What really concerned me wasn't the pet sitting. It was how quickly Princess became the center of our family's universe. Sunday dinners now revolved around Princess's schedule. Family conversations consisted almost entirely of Princess stories. My parents, who had never been particularly demonstrative with affection, lavished attention on the dog in ways they never had with their own children. "Look how smart she is," Mom would coo, watching Princess perform the basic tricks that I had actually taught her during my babysitting sessions. "Jennifer, you're such a natural with animals." The praise that had once been rare and precious was now flowing freely, just not in my direction. When I mentioned a promotion I was up for at work, the conversation quickly turned to whether Princess might benefit from advanced obedience classes. When I tried to share that I'd been feeling unusually tired lately, Mom suggested I should exercise more, like Jennifer did when she walked Princess. The breaking point came on my 31st birthday. I had planned a small family dinner, nothing fancy, just hoping for a few hours where I could feel like the focus of attention for once. I had even taken the afternoon off work to help Mom cook my favorite meal, her famous lasagna that she only made for special occasions. Everything was ready by 6 o'clock. The table was set with the good china, candles were lit, and the smell of garlic bread filled the house. I sat in the living room with Dad, watching the news and waiting for Jennifer to arrive with Princess, whom she now brought everywhere, because she gets separation anxiety. 6:30 came and went, then 7 o'clock. At 7:15, my phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. OMG emergency. Princess is throwing up everywhere. Think she ate something bad on our walk. Heading to emergency vet now. So sorry, sis. We'll make it up to you. I stared at the message, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. Princess is sick, I announced to my parents. Jen's taking her to the emergency vet. Oh no! Mom's hand flew to her chest. The poor little thing. Is it serious? I don't know. She just said Princess was vomiting. Dad was already reaching for his car keys. We should go. Jennifer shouldn't have to handle this alone. But I gestured helplessly at the table, at the dinner that was growing cold, at the birthday cake with 31 candles waiting to be lit. It's my birthday dinner. Mom was already blowing out the candles and gathering her purse. Sweetie, we can do your birthday any day. This is an emergency. Family takes care of family, right? I watched my parents rush out the door, leaving me alone with a table full of food and the increasingly loud silence of an empty house. I sat there for a long time, still wearing the new dress I'd bought for the occasion, staring at the melting wax where my birthday candles had been. That was the night I first noticed the tightness in my chest, a feeling like my lungs weren't quite working properly. I told myself it was just disappointment, just the sting of being forgotten on my own birthday. But the feeling didn't go away, even after Jennifer texted later to say Princess was fine. She'd just eaten too much grass at the dog park. The incident should have been a wake-up call, but instead, it somehow became the new normal. Princess's needs superseded everything else, including basic family relationships. When I tried to plan a weekend trip to visit my college roommate, it had to be canceled because Jennifer was going out of town and someone needed to watch Princess. When I suggested we hire a dog sitter, I was told it was irresponsible to leave such a young dog with a stranger. Besides, Mom said, Princess loves you so much. Look how she follows you around when she's here. It was true. Princess had developed an attachment to me that bordered on separation anxiety. She would whine when I left the room and sleep pressed against my legs when I was visiting. Jennifer found this endearing and used it as further justification for why I should be the primary backup caregiver. The financial drain was steady and relentless. Princess needed special food because regular kibble upset her stomach, $60 a month. She needed a particular kind of toy that wouldn't tear up easily, $30 each, replaced weekly. There was grooming every 6 weeks, monthly vet checkups, heartworm prevention, flea and tick medication, and an endless stream of emergencies that required immediate veterinary attention. Each expense was presented as urgent and necessary, and each time, the family looked to me to solve the problem. I found myself putting emergency vet bills on credit cards, dipping into savings meant for my future, postponing my own dental work and doctor visits because the money had already been allocated to Princess's care. "You're so good to us," Jennifer would say after I'd handed over another check. "I don't know what we'd do without you." But even as she said it, I could see her attention already shifting back to Princess, her fingers automatically reaching to scratch behind the dog's ears. I was useful, appreciated in an abstract way, but I wasn't loved the way Princess was loved, unconditionally, enthusiastically, with the kind of pure joy that lit up my family's faces every time that dog walked into the room. The chest tightness was getting worse. It came and went at first, but gradually became a constant companion. I felt like I was breathing through a straw, like my heart was working too hard just to keep up with basic functions. When I mentioned it to Mom during one of our weekly phone calls, she suggested I try yoga. "Stress can cause all sorts of physical symptoms," she said absently. I could hear Princess barking in the background and Jennifer baby talking to her. "Maybe you're working too hard. You know what they say about all work and no play." I don't really have time to play," I said, thinking about the overtime I'd been putting in to make up for all the money I'd been spending on my sister's dog. "Between work and helping with Princess?" "Oh, that reminds me," Mom interrupted. "Jennifer's thinking about enrolling Princess in agility classes. They're supposed to be wonderful for high-energy dogs. The instructor comes very highly recommended, but the program is a bit expensive." I closed my eyes and leaned against my kitchen counter, feeling the familiar weight of expectation. Princess needed agility classes. Jennifer needed support. The family needed me to solve another problem with my credit card and my willingness to sacrifice my own needs for everyone else's happiness. "How much?" I asked. The morning I collapsed at work, I had been reviewing budget reports when the world suddenly tilted sideways. One moment I was sitting at my desk, calculator in hand, and the next I was on the floor with my coworkers' faces swimming above me, their voices sounding like they were coming from underwater. "Call 911, someone was saying. "She's not responding." I tried to tell them I was fine, that I just needed a moment to catch my breath, but my voice wouldn't work. The tightness in my chest had become a crushing weight, and every breath felt like trying to inhale concrete. The last thing I remember was the sound of sirens growing louder and the feeling of being lifted onto something that rolled. I woke up in the hospital 3 hours later, connected to more machines than I could count. A doctor with kind eyes and graying hair was standing beside my bed, writing notes on a chart. "Miss Anderson," he said when he noticed I was awake, "I'm Dr. Martinez. You gave us quite a scare. How are you feeling?" "Tired," I managed, my voice coming out as barely a whisper. "What happened?" "You suffered a cardiac episode. Your heart went into an irregular rhythm and your blood pressure dropped dangerously low. We've run some preliminary tests, and it appears you have a condition called dilated cardiomyopathy. Your heart muscle has become enlarged and weakened, which affects its ability to pump blood efficiently." The words didn't quite register at first. Heart problems were for old people, for men who ate too much red meat and didn't exercise. I was 31, relatively healthy, albeit stressed and tired. "Is it serious?" I asked. Dr. Martinez sat down in the chair beside my bed, and something about his body language told me this wasn't going to be a conversation about lifestyle changes and taking vitamins. "Miss Anderson, I need to be honest with you. This is a serious condition. Without proper treatment, dilated cardiomyopathy can be life-threatening. The fact that you collapsed suggests your heart is already under significant strain. We need to start treatment immediately and monitor you closely." How long will I be here?" "At least a week, possibly longer, depending on how you respond to treatment. We need to stabilize your heart rhythm and adjust your medications. I also need to ask, do you have family we should contact? Someone should know what's happening." I gave him my parents' number and Jennifer's, along with my emergency contact information. As he wrote everything down, I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. Fear of what this diagnosis meant for my future, but relief that finally, maybe, my family would understand that I hadn't been exaggerating about feeling unwell. Maybe they would see that the stress and exhaustion I'd been experiencing was actually my body trying to tell me something important. "I'll have the nurse call your family right away," Dr. Martinez said. "They'll want to know you're here." I nodded and settled back against the hospital pillows, watching the heart monitor beside my bed trace the irregular rhythm of what was apparently a very sick organ. For the first time in years, I had nowhere to be, no one depending on me to solve their problems or fund their emergencies. It was a strange feeling, being completely still, completely unavailable to everyone who usually demanded pieces of me. The nurse came by an hour later, a middle-aged woman with gentle hands and a warm smile. "I called your parents and your sister," she said, adjusting the IV in my arm. "I explained the situation and let them know visiting hours go until 9 o'clock. "What did they say?" "Your mother sounded very concerned. She said they'd be here as soon as possible." I looked at the clock on the wall, 2:30 p.m. Visiting hours had just started, and the hospital was only 20 minutes from my parents' house. I settled in to wait, trying to imagine how this would unfold. Mom would probably cry a little and insist on bringing me care packages. Dad would be awkwardly emotional, the way he got during times of crisis. Jennifer would be shocked and guilty, realizing that all those times I'd said I was tired and stressed, I'd actually been sick. 3 o'clock came and went, then 4 o'clock. At 5, I asked the nurse if there had been any other calls from my family. "Not that I'm aware of," she said, checking my chart. "Would you like me to try calling them again?" "Maybe just my mom's cell phone," I said, though something cold was starting to form in the pit of my stomach. The nurse returned 15 minutes later with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I spoke with your mother," she said carefully. She said they're dealing with a situation with your sister's dog and can't make it today, but they'll try to come tomorrow. I stared at her, certain I had misheard. I'm sorry, what? She said your sister is walking her dog and they can't leave right now. She asked me to tell you they hope you feel better soon. The room suddenly felt very quiet except for the beeping of the heart monitor, which seemed to be getting faster. Did you explain that I'm in the cardiac unit? That this is serious? The nurse's face softened with something that might have been pity. Yes, honey. I explained that you had a cardiac episode and that you're being monitored closely. I told her the doctor classified your condition as potentially life-threatening if left untreated. And she said they couldn't come because of a dog walk. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Sometimes families react to medical emergencies in unexpected ways. People process shock differently. But this wasn't shock. This was a choice. The same choice my family had been making for years, dressed up in different circumstances but fundamentally identical. Princess's needs, even something as routine as a daily walk, trumped my emergency hospitalization. I closed my eyes and tried to absorb what had just happened. My heart was literally failing. I was alone in a hospital room filled with machines keeping me alive, and my family was prioritizing a dog's exercise schedule over my medical crisis. The nurse squeezed my hand gently. Is there anyone else we can call? A friend, maybe, or other family members? I thought about my college roommate in Boston, my coworkers who barely knew me outside of project meetings, the few friends I'd lost touch with over the years because I'd been too busy managing my family's emotional and financial emergencies. I had systematically isolated myself, pouring all my energy into being the perfect daughter and sister while neglecting every other relationship in my life. No, I said quietly. There's no one else. That first night alone in the cardiac unit was the longest of my life. Every sound seemed amplified. The beeping of monitors, the shuffle of nurses' feet in the hallway, the distant conversations from other rooms where families gathered around their loved ones. I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles, counting the holes in each square, trying to process what had just happened. My family had chosen a dog walk over my potentially fatal heart condition. The nurse who delivered the message, Maria, according to her name tag, checked on me frequently throughout the evening. She didn't say much, but there was something in her eyes that suggested she'd seen this before, families who disappointed when it mattered most. Honey, she said during her midnight rounds, I've been doing this for 23 years, and I want you to know that sometimes the people who are supposed to love us most are the ones who hurt us deepest. But that doesn't say anything about your worth. That says everything about their limitations. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The heart monitor continued its irregular beeping, a soundtrack to my emotional unraveling. Can I ask you something? Maria continued, adjusting my blankets with practiced gentleness. When was the last time you did something just for yourself? Something that made you happy? I tried to think back, but the memories felt foggy and distant. My birthday dinner that never happened. The vacation I'd been planning, but never took. The dental appointment I'd postponed for Princess's emergency vet bill. The graduate program I'd considered but couldn't afford after helping with Jennifer's college expenses. I can't remember, I admitted. Maria nodded knowingly. Sometimes we give so much of ourselves away that we forget we're allowed to keep some pieces. Your heart didn't just get sick randomly, sweetie. Bodies break down when we don't take care of them, when we carry stress and put everyone else's needs before our own basic health. The second day brought a different doctor, Dr. Sarah Chen, a cardiologist who explained my condition in more detail. The tests showed significant enlargement of my heart muscle, likely caused by years of chronic stress and exhaustion that I'd ignored while taking care of everyone else's crises. Miss Anderson, I need you to understand something, Dr. Chen said, pulling up my test results on a tablet. This condition didn't develop overnight. This is the result of prolonged stress on your cardiovascular system. Have you been under significant pressure recently? I almost laughed. Recently? Try the last decade. My family, they rely on me for a lot of things. Financial support, emotional support. I guess I've been feeling overwhelmed. Overwhelmed enough that you've been ignoring your own health symptoms? I thought about all the times I'd dismissed the chest tightness, the fatigue, the shortness of breath. All the times I'd pushed through feeling unwell because someone needed me to solve a problem or write a check. Yes, I admitted. I thought it was just stress. Stress can kill you, Miss Anderson. It nearly did. We're going to start you on medication to help your heart function more efficiently. But you need to understand that recovery isn't just about pills. You need to make significant lifestyle changes. You need to reduce stress, get adequate rest, and stop putting everyone else's needs ahead of your basic health. That afternoon, the phone calls started. Not from my family, they maintained their radio silence, but from Jennifer's friends who'd apparently heard about my hospitalization through social media. Jennifer had posted a cryptic message about family emergencies and keeping Princess calm during difficult times, which had prompted questions from people who actually cared about my well-being. "Rebecca? Oh my God, I just heard you're in the hospital," said Amanda, Jennifer's college roommate who'd always been kind to me. Jennifer posted something weird about family stress, and I got worried. What happened? For the first time since arriving at the hospital, I broke down completely. Something about hearing genuine concern in another person's voice cracked open all the emotion I'd been holding back. I told Amanda everything: the heart condition, my family's absence, the years of being treated like a walking ATM while Princess received more love and attention than I ever had. "Wait," Amanda said, her voice sharp with disbelief. "You're telling me that Jennifer and your parents know you're in the cardiac unit with a life-threatening condition, and they haven't come to see you because of a dog walk? It sounds insane when you say it like that." "It is insane, Rebecca. That's not normal family behavior. That's not even normal human behavior." Amanda's reaction was like a mirror, reflecting back the absolute abnormality of my situation. In my family, I'd become so accustomed to being deprioritized that I'd started to believe it was normal, that I was asking for too much by expecting them to care about my medical emergency. "I can't believe I'm saying this about Jennifer," Amanda continued, "but this is absolutely fucked up. She posts daily Instagram stories about that dog's breakfast choices, but she can't visit her sister in the hospital." The third day brought a call from my parents' next-door neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who'd known me since childhood. "Rebecca, dear, I heard from Patricia that you're in the hospital. I wanted to call and check on you myself." "That's very kind of you, Mrs. Patterson." "Well, I have to say I'm confused. I saw your parents and Jennifer yesterday evening, and they seemed to be having a perfectly normal day. They were in the backyard with that golden retriever, having a little barbecue. When I asked Patricia how you were doing, she said you were resting comfortably, like you had a mild cold." My stomach dropped. They were having barbecues while I was fighting heart failure. "Mrs. Patterson, did they mention that I'm in the cardiac unit?" "The cardiac unit? Oh, my dear, no. Patricia made it sound like you were just getting a routine checkup. Are you having heart problems?" I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar pattern of my family minimizing my experiences, even to neighbors. They'd managed to reframe my medical emergency as a minor inconvenience, allowing them to continue their normal lives without the burden of guilt or responsibility. By the fourth day, something inside me was shifting. The crushing sadness was being replaced by something cleaner and sharper: clarity. Maria had been right about bodies breaking down when we don't care for them, but she was also right about recognizing our own worth. I started paying attention to how I felt when I wasn't constantly worried about my family's needs. The anxiety that had been my constant companion for years was noticeably absent, even with the stress of being hospitalized. For the first time in decades, I wasn't responsible for anyone else's emotional state or financial crisis. I wasn't on call for emergencies that weren't really emergencies. I wasn't managing other people's lives while neglecting my own basic health. It was peaceful in a way I'd forgotten was possible. Dr. Chen stopped by that evening with updates on my treatment plan. "Your heart rhythm has stabilized significantly since you've been here," she said, reviewing my latest test results. "The medication is working well, and I'm encouraged by your progress." "Does that mean I can go home soon?" "Physically, yes, but I'm concerned about sending you back to the same environment that contributed to this condition in the first place. Miss Anderson, I need to ask some difficult questions about your home situation." I found myself telling Dr. Chen everything, Not just about the past week, but about years of financial exploitation disguised as family obligation, emotional manipulation masked as love, and my complete inability to set boundaries with people who claimed to care about me while consistently proving otherwise. "Rebecca," Dr. Chin said when I finished, "what you're describing isn't a loving family dynamic. It's a pattern of emotional and financial abuse. You've been conditioned to believe that your value lies in what you can provide for others, not in your inherent worth as a human being." The word abuse hit me like a physical blow. I'd never thought of it that way, probably because the abuse was wrapped in family obligations and guilt rather than obvious cruelty. But when I really examined the pattern, the constant financial demands, the emotional manipulation, the gaslighting when I expressed my own needs, it was impossible to deny. "I don't know how to change it," I admitted. "This is all I've ever known." Change starts with recognizing that you have choices, even when those choices are difficult. You can't control how your family treats you, but you can control how much access they have to hurt you. That night, I lay awake thinking about choices. For 31 years, I'd operated under the assumption that family was everything, that blood relationships were sacred regardless of how toxic they became. But what if that wasn't true? What if family was something you chose based on how people treated you, not an obligation you were born into? The fifth day brought an unexpected visitor. Not my family, but Amanda, Jennifer's college roommate who'd driven 4 hours from Philadelphia just to check on me. "I had to see for myself that you were okay," she said, settling into the chair beside my bed with a bag of magazines and homemade cookies. "I keep thinking about our phone conversation, and I can't get over how wrong this whole situation is." "You didn't have to drive all this way." "Rebecca, you've been alone in a cardiac unit for 5 days. Your sister posts Instagram stories about her dog's morning routine, but can't be bothered to visit her hospitalized sister. Someone needed to show up for you, and if your family won't do it, then I will." I started crying again, overwhelmed by the simple kindness of someone who barely knew me, but had still taken time off work and driven hours to sit with me. It highlighted the stark contrast between Amanda's behavior and my family's. She was Jennifer's friend, not mine, yet she'd shown more care and concern than my own parents. "Can I tell you something?" Amanda said, offering me tissues from the bedside table. "I've known Jennifer for 6 years, and I've watched how your family treats you. It's always bothered me, but I didn't feel like it was my place to say anything. The way they take your money, dismiss your feelings, expect you to drop everything for their emergencies while never reciprocating. It's not normal, Rebecca. It's not how people who love you are supposed to behave." "But they do love me," I said automatically, the defensive response so deeply ingrained that it came out without thought. "Do they? Because love isn't just a feeling, it's action. Love shows up when you're sick. Love prioritizes your well-being. Love doesn't treat you like a walking ATM while giving a dog more attention and affection than they give you." Amanda's words echoed Dr. Chen's assessment and Maria's gentle observations. 3 different people, coming from 3 different perspectives, had all reached the same conclusion about my family dynamic. Maybe it was time to stop making excuses for behavior that was inexcusable. On the 6th day, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I called the hospital's social worker and asked about resources for people leaving toxic family situations. I researched apartments in different neighborhoods, looked into changing my bank accounts, and started planning for a life where I wasn't constantly available to solve other people's problems. The social worker, a compassionate woman named Linda, helped me understand that what I was experiencing was called financial abuse and emotional manipulation, and that many people struggled to leave these situations because the abusers were family members who used love and obligation as weapons. "The hardest part," Linda explained, "is often the guilt. You've been conditioned to believe that setting boundaries is selfish, that prioritizing your own well-being makes you a bad daughter or sister. But Rebecca, you can't take care of anyone else if you don't take care of yourself first. Your heart failure is proof of that." That evening, I sat down with a notebook and wrote out everything I wanted to say to my family. All the hurt, anger, disappointment, and final realizations that had crystallized during my week of abandonment. The words poured out like water through a broken dam, years of suppressed emotion finally finding expression. I wrote about the birthday dinners canceled for dog emergencies, the savings accounts drained for pet expenses, the constant expectation that I would sacrifice my own needs for Princess's comfort. I wrote about feeling invisible in my own family, valued only for my ability to solve problems and fund crises. I wrote about the crushing realization that a dog's daily walk was more important to them than their daughter's life-threatening medical emergency. But most importantly, I wrote about my decision to choose myself for the first time in 31 years. The seventh morning brought unexpected chaos. Dr. Chen arrived with discharge papers and a comprehensive treatment plan that included medication, lifestyle changes, and regular follow-up appointments. I was medically stable enough to leave, though she emphasized that my recovery would depend entirely on reducing stress and prioritizing my own health. "I'm proud of you, Rebecca," she said as I signed the discharge forms. "I know this week has been difficult, but I've watched you come to some important realizations about your life. That takes courage." As I packed my few belongings, Maria stopped by with a final piece of advice. "Honey, when you get home, there's going to be pressure to go back to the way things were. Your family is going to want their convenient problem solver back, and they're going to use guilt and manipulation to try to make that happen. Remember that you almost died because you put everyone else's needs before your own basic health. Don't let them convince you to do that again." I hugged her goodbye, grateful for the wisdom and kindness she'd shown me during the darkest week of my life. The apartment I'd arranged to view was a small one-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood across town, far enough from my family's house to feel like a fresh start, but close enough to my job that the commute wouldn't be problematic. It was nothing fancy, just basic furniture and clean surfaces, but it felt like freedom. I spent the afternoon setting up new bank accounts, changing my address with important institutions, and making a list of all the subscriptions and automatic payments I'd been covering for my family. Princess's pet insurance, Jennifer's phone bill, the family Netflix account that somehow everyone used but only I paid for. It was shocking how many financial tentacles had wormed their way into my life over the years. As evening approached, I found myself thinking about my family. They would expect me to come home eventually, to resume my role as the family ATM and emotional caretaker. They probably assumed I was sulking about their absence from the hospital, that I'd get over it and things would return to normal. They had no idea that normal had almost killed me. I pulled out the letter I'd written in the hospital, pages of raw emotion and painful truth, and began editing it into something more concise but equally clear. This wasn't a manifesto or a dramatic gesture. It was simply my explanation for why I was choosing to remove myself from a dynamic that had nearly cost me my life. The final version was 2 pages long, handwritten on hospital stationery that I'd kept as a reminder of where putting everyone else first had landed me. It explained my heart condition, their absence during my medical emergency, and my decision to prioritize my own health and well-being going forward. It wasn't angry or accusatory, it was just honest about a relationship dynamic that had become unsustainable. At the bottom I wrote, "I'm not cutting you out of my life to hurt you. I'm removing myself from situations that hurt me. There's a difference, and I hope someday you'll understand it." The next morning, I drove to my parents' house while they were at work, and Jennifer was at her part-time job. The spare key was still hidden under the ceramic frog by the front door, and I let myself in for what I knew would be the last time. The house looked exactly the same. Family photos on the mantel, Mom's throw pillows arranged just so on the couch, the lingering smell of vanilla candles. But something fundamental had shifted in how I experienced this space. Instead of feeling like home, it felt like a museum of my own diminishment, full of memories of being overlooked and undervalued. I placed the letter on my old bed, the same bed I'd slept in as a child, the room that had been converted into a guest room years ago when Jennifer decided she needed a bigger space for all of Princess's toys and accessories. The irony wasn't lost on me. Even my childhood bedroom had been repurposed to accommodate the dog. Before leaving, I walked through the house one last time, saying goodbye to 31 years of being the family's emotional and financial safety net. I thought about all the times I'd sat at the kitchen table writing checks for other people's emergencies, all the Sunday dinners where Princess got more attention than I did, all the conversations that had been interrupted because someone needed to attend to the dog's needs. I thought about the person I'd been when I walked into the hospital a week ago, exhausted, stressed, literally dying from the effort of keeping everyone else happy while neglecting my own basic needs. And I thought about the person I was becoming, someone who understood that love shouldn't require self-destruction, that family shouldn't be synonymous with exploitation. As I drove away from the house on Maple Street, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the temporary relief that came from solving someone else's crisis, but the deep, sustainable peace that comes from finally choosing yourself after a lifetime of choosing everyone else. My phone was already buzzing with missed calls and frantic text messages. They'd found the letter. But for the first time in my adult life, someone else's emotional emergency wasn't my responsibility to manage. I was free to focus on my own healing, both physical and emotional, without the constant drain of other people's manufactured crises and endless needs. The color had indeed drained from their faces when they read that letter, just as the life had been draining from mine for years while they were too busy with Princess to notice. But now, finally, I was choosing to live for myself instead of slowly dying for them, and that choice, I realized, was going to save my life in every way that mattered.